This week on Commercial Real Estate Secrets, we will be discussing, is all media good media in commercial real estate? The state of the market from a commercial real estate media personnel, drones that clean, and Denver housing affordability. This week's listener of the week is Sam Sells. Sam, thank you so much for leaving us a 5-star review. And for those of you listening, if you leave us a 5-star review below, you might be next week's listener of the week. This week on Commercial Real Estate Secrets, we have Mr. Matt Geiger. Matt is a reporter here with Business Den. Matt, thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Matt, tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, where you come from, and how you got to where you are today in commercial real estate.
Sure. So I'm a commercial real estate reporter. So I write about everything from warehouses to apartments and everything in between. I've been doing this for about a year. This is my first job, actually, at a college where I worked at the student newspaper. And my background's in economics. So I come at this a little bit differently than a lot of other folks, I think, that are in the journalism world. Much more interested in how the business cycles work, how people are doing commerce. That type of stuff I think is really interesting. So yeah, I like every aspect of commercial real estate, including cemeteries. I just wrote a story about a cemetery. You could call that commercial real estate, I think.
Absolutely. Which cemetery?
In Littleton. It's the Littleton Cemetery.
I think cemeteries are interesting too, but that's a whole nother. That's a whole
What's
nother.
the cap rate on the cemetery, Aviva?
I think they're actually pretty good.
I would hope so.
And the occupants, they don't complain about anything.
No, they're fully leased all the time.
So bad. Let me ask you. I had this conversation with someone yesterday. Some people find commercial real estate to be somewhat boring, but you write about it day in and day out. How do you combat the notion that commercial real estate is boring and you can only talk about so much in the industry?
That's a good question. It is a challenge. That's something that I think a lot of people don't understand about the reporter's job, is to try to find the most interesting things in every single story, even if it seems boring from the face. The way that we usually do that is pretty simple. You just want to write about people. People are the center of everything. So when people ask me what I do and I tell them that I write about commercial real estate, they give me this look, especially if they're not in that industry. They're like, that sounds really boring, dude. And I'm like, no, it's not. Because think about it, though. Who's the kind of person that builds a skyscraper? Wouldn't you want to meet that person? They got to be really interesting. Who builds your apartment building? Wouldn't they be interesting to talk to? It's just a world that I think a lot of people aren't in, but everybody interacts with. That I think if you find the people that are in that industry and you get them to talk really candidly about what they do, you just learn so many stories, whether it's a historic building and the horse skulls that are found in the basement of this abandoned hotel, or how difficult it is to put a deal together to build Denver's newest office building. Those are the types of things that I think make stories more interesting when we talk about people and then the building, as opposed to the building preceding the person.
I think that's super smart. And yeah, it's funny. You're right. Buildings are just that, buildings, until you get somebody in it and then you have a story.
Right.
Most of the time.
Not always. That's true.
Not always. So what does your process look like in terms of finding the story to publishing it?
Sure. So I have every single brokerage tapped and bugged. And I listen to all their conversations. No. I have a lot of friends that I wouldn't say friends, but I have a lot of sources that I talk to that are in the commercial real estate industry. Folks that work in brokerages, folks that are private equity guys, people that are contractors, subcontractors. It's just a wide array of people that interact with commercial real estate, whether they're building the building, financing the building, or designing it. Those are the types of people that will tell me what projects they're working on. They'll let me know what their other partners are working on. But it's also just a game of public records, how good you can get at tracking every single transaction, every single permit. You have to be able to pull out from a site plan what might be interesting for a news story. I had never looked at architectural drawings or site development plans before this job. If you told me that I would be doing this a year ago, I would probably wouldn't believe you, but that's how you find your stories. So I look at every single deal that's publicly recorded every day. And that's
Wow.
yeah, no. And it's a lot easier than it sounds. Especially now. I mean, we could talk about this too, but no one's really buying or selling a whole lot of real estate. So there isn't a whole lot of deals for me to look at and write about. But that's typically the two methods. It's going to be either somebody telling me or I find it myself through documents or just walking around. I just drive up and down Colfax. I drive up and down Broadway. Oh, that building I haven't seen before. Let me call about it. That kind of stuff.
How are you looking at records just off of the county website?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, every single municipality in the state and anywhere in the country really has their own public records database, whether it's for deeds, so just buying and selling property, or for permitting, deeds of trust too. I can see all the financing agreements. And sometimes there just are more quirky deals that get recorded in there too that you can pull from. So it's just the county website generally.
Speaking of quirky deals, do you
Yes.
have any stories you've written about that are just, they stand out in terms of quirk?
Or, oh man. Yeah. Drones that clean buildings. That was
Wow.
crazy. Yeah, I went over so the old Stapleton Airport where Denver International used to be, um, has the remaining uh control tower. And it's
Sure.
like yeah, and it's a brewery actually in the bottom. So you can go there and have a burger and a beer, but up top it's the old flight control tower. And these guys were like, I haven't cleaned this thing since I bought it 15 years ago or whenever they bought it. So what am I going to do to clean this? It looks dirty. And there's this new business that actually uses drones to, and I wrote a story about this, to clean buildings. They have like this little nozzle on the nose of
Wow.
the drone and it sprays up and down. It doesn't agitate, I think, but it is interesting, like just to watch a little drone fly around and like clean a building. That was just a random Monday morning, and I was watching drones fly around clean buildings. So I would say that's probably one of the more quirky ones for sure.
And that building is a sweet building. I love that
It
property.
is really, really nice. It's extremely unique. It's probably the only building like that in the city.
Yeah. Um, so that's fascinating. Love it. Uh,
Yes.
and not to now go from quirkiness to what some might see as the mundane, but the state of the market. You mentioned that a lot of buildings are not trading right now.
Hmm.
What is your take as a commercial real estate reporter on the state of the market today in 2024?
Wow, you're asking a renter their opinion on the state of the market. My youthful and naive perspective, because I go into every story thinking and knowing that I know the least. I think that having that mentality is really important. But as far as what I have surmised from interacting with folks in this industry, everybody's waiting for the market to be more appealing to invest in. It costs a lot to have debt right now, and it costs a lot to build anything right now. These are talking points that have been repeated from me on up to Capitol Hill, on down to everybody in commercial real estate. I think it's just a matter of, and for some reason, we're also waiting for the election. I haven't figured that one out. I don't really know how the president of the United States is going to impact my cap rate in my warehouse, but I mean, that's to each their own. Um, so I think that the state of the market, if we're going to say what it's at right now, it's just a game of waiting. Everybody's in a holding pattern, waiting for
Yeah.
things to get more affordable and easier to pencil. The other thing that's interesting, specifically to Denver, and the suburbs here, are that there are a lot of there's a lot of how do I frame this? Discussions and discord about the process to build. In Denver, that's a very hot topic. In the suburbs, it's a hot topic because we have questions about affordability. And many people from city council on down to a broker have different perspectives of how we can solve that problem of housing just not being affordable. So I think that that is also impacting Denver and the suburbs markets as well, is that we've had recent changes in our affordability laws here. We've had recent changes to development processes. So um,
Yeah.
it's still a game of figuring out how to navigate these in the city. It's also figuring out how they can both protect the constituents and the neighborhoods while also encouraging businesses. It's a very difficult thing to balance. And I cover it every day.
And Denver seems to have a very hard time finding that balance.
It's difficult. It's tough. I sympathize with city council, and I sympathize with developers, and I sympathize with renters like me. I think everybody, the benefit to this problem, I suppose, is that everybody has the same vested interest. People that build houses want to build houses. People that live in houses want to live in houses, and the city wants to make it more affordable. It's just about finding the right way to do it, I think, is the challenge. And there's a lot of different perspectives and opinions. And we'll kind of just see how it plays out over the next couple of years.
I was in the Industrial Real Estate Summit a couple months ago, and they opened the summit with somebody who worked for Energize Denver. And for the listeners, Energize Denver is essentially an initiative that has been deployed on warehouse owners, tenants, etc., creating certain requirements to meet energy requirements in Denver. And it was, unfortunately, Energize Denver has killed a lot of deals, has costed people a lot of money, and I couldn't believe they opened the summit with somebody who worked for it, explaining it, and it was funny to watch the brokers squirming because of understanding the number of deals that have died, slow, sad deaths because of these new regulations here in Denver, but it's all part of playing ball. So
it's the same kind of challenge with the affordability because
right.
you have the city the city feels like it has to do something, has to take an initiative to improve affordability in the city. And it's done that by mandating affordability ratio, essentially, of certain number of units in an apartment building to be affordable, or rather income restricted. It's the same thing with the Energize Denver program, where obviously I would think it would be difficult to find folks that are pro having more electricity usage and more utilities being used, because we are at capacity. Our grid is behind. I just listened to a meeting this morning where a data center was being proposed for a location north of Denver, and the issue was precisely over this, not having enough energy, not having enough electricity. I've talked with some folks that struggle to get some projects approved because they're having to get the utility to approve them in the first place, and it's a question of will we have the energy. So Energize Denver, to a lot of people that are buying and selling property from like a profit perspective, could be getting in the way of that motive. But the other thing that I think a lot of people need to consider is that energy is a finite resource. And in Denver and in Colorado, we see that especially so. I'm not an expert on the grid. I won't pretend like I am, but I do know that our entire country is behind in our electrical grid. And the same goes for other resources like water. Business Net had a Future of Water panel where our state is quite not struggling, but there are a lot of places north of Denver that are struggling to find the water or make the water math work. And so I think Energize Denver is one method of trying to fix this problem. There's a lot of disagreement and discussion as to is this the right method that needs to be followed. So we'll see what happens. I think the first deadlines for people's energy usage is this year. I think every property owner has to meet certain benchmarks. So we'll kind of see how it plays out. It's going to be a very interesting and long-term story, I believe, in the city.
Yep, the saga continues.
It does, for sure.
So let me ask you, if you were buying commercial real estate today, what type of building would you buy?
Okay, well, first I'd ask you for a loan for the down payment. I would buy a warehouse. I love warehouses, but like that's partly the economist in me. Warehouses, like as an investment, make the most sense in my head. I also just I think it's important that we have people that build and own apartment buildings, but personally, I don't know if I'd be a good landlord for people living there. That seems like a pretty big responsibility to have to take on, having to manage people's living situations, and I don't know if I want to get in the middle of that. I'm a Zoomer. I'm part of Gen Z, so office buildings are for my generation are a little interesting. I like the concept of office buildings, but they definitely are changing. I think the most interesting investment right now would be in a warehouse because there's so much happening with them. But people don't talk about them because they're like, oh, it's just another warehouse. I actually got in an argument with my parents over the new giant 1 million square foot warehouses. And there is a really interesting question about that. Hate to throw this back at you, but I want to ask you about this.
Sure.
And just briefly, I got in a conversation with my parents because they believe that these new giant warehouses, which I'm talking about as a potentially good investment, which are now serving e-commerce, which are now taking care of the Amazon orders and so on. But my parents are concerned that they're damaging the retail experience. That because of the growth in e-commerce, that there used to be an experience of going shopping. This is before my time, but the mall. I mean, there's a movie called Clerks, and then they have a movie like The Mallrats after that. That experience, how important is that to maintain, and how do we balance that with the development of warehouses? I don't know. I don't know if you thought
It's,
about that at all.
of course, I've thought about that. I walk into a Bed Bath and Beyond before they went online exclusively, and I always noticed that the folks in the BB&B were boomers. There were never young people in the Bed Bath and Beyond. And I think that plays to a larger trend societally where our parents were used to, they like the experience of getting up, going, shopping, touching, tangible, the whole nine in the shopping experience. But then folks like us, who have grown up with e-commerce, or maybe we're just more, you know, uh, savvy with our buying subscription service. I always think about Chewy, the pet food brand. It's like the most profound change in the pet food industry, in my opinion. I won't bore you. But the reality is that we don't have control over the trends of society. And what's going on right now is our society is trending towards leaving the retail experience. I hate shopping. I get everything delivered.
Wow.
But that's not to say that the retail experience is dead. We're seeing it being revitalized in new ways. For example, I know like pickleball facilities are opening up in previous Bed Bath and Beyond buildings.
That's
So
true.
yes, shopping is changing for better or for worse. Retail isn't dying, right? You can never recreate a restaurant. You can never recreate a salon. You can never recreate a pickleball facility or a gym. But we don't have control over how society reacts to advances in technology. But like I'm not pulling out a tissue box for my local retail landlord. I think everybody's going to be okay.
All right. All right. Fair enough. Tell it to my parents, though.
Okay. No, I mean, it is a huge shift. Um, a large percentage of Walgreens, CVS's, uh, these guys are on the chopping block. They're on the way out. And I empathize, and I'm curious to see what those buildings will turn into. But, those business models don't quite align with how society consumes goods and real estate today. And we don't have control over that. We just have control over how we navigate thereafter. So that's my spiel.
Thank you. I enjoyed the soapbox, Aviva.
Thank
I
you. Thank you.
I I am I'm curious. This is just one of those, again, that's the nature of the job. It's not that I have a ton of opinions necessarily. It's more that I have a bunch of long-term questions that won't be answered for years. And this is one of them.
So let me ask you, is all media good media?
All media, good media. You mean as in just well, it's tough. That's a broad question. I think we have people that call things content now. And I think that that's good for them. But what I struggle with is the thing that we do at Business End that is fundamentally different than Not that different than the Denver Post or from the Business Journal necessarily, but from what people consider content, is that we are trying to put something out that's new every single day. And that is just objective, and it's just a stack of facts. And it's people like you, Aviva, or whoever else I'd be interviewing that provides the context to them. It's tough because some media does misinform. I think it's good that we live in a country where people can freely put out whatever they want to, and can speak their mind. But when I think about where we're headed with content and media and information, it's really making my job more difficult. There are more and more people that feel less responsible to have to answer my questions, which subsequently puts folks in the public in the dark. And that to me is really frustrating. And it seems like there are certain questions that are verboten. Like, I ask businesses what their revenue is. I ask builders how much it costs to build a building. But I can tell that they don't like those questions a lot of the time, but I have to ask them because that's the other element of this whole entire picture is we live in a free market, but a free market can only exist with full information. If people are trying to have a conversation with a reporter and they're giving me limited information and I publish limited information, that doesn't really help the free market. I see my stories as data points. Sales price is a data point. A lease is a data point. The less information that I have, the more it just hurts everybody else, in my opinion. So that's kind of the big thing for me. I am all about transparency. I'm all about writing as much information as I can fit into a story. I don't think all media is necessarily good media. I think the news is really important. We're seeing the news change a lot, but I think that if people continue to avoid or decide not to talk to me, they're going to find that down the road, it's going to be a much different place to do business when we don't know what's going on. It goes from everything from foreclosures, which people obviously don't want me to write about, to sales, to good deals, to positive stories. I think all of them are important because we live in a free country where the news should be free and it should be full of information.
That was a great answer. Good job.
Thank you. I had to do it tastefully. But you can tell I get a little frustrated sometimes. I really do. And I understand that people don't want to answer every single one of my questions. And sometimes I ask bad questions, and sometimes I say I don't get a good story out of it, and that's just the way that things go. But I just would appreciate the most candid conversation with everybody I meet. That's the goal every time.
I love that. So let me ask you, what makes you happy with what you do day to day in commercial real estate?
Sure. I get to watch the city grow. With no debt. Everybody, you hear that? I'm not leveraged. I'm chilling. You guys can make all those investments. I'm over here writing about them. It's kind of the best of both worlds. I get to rent, my little Denver house with my buddies, and I get to watch the whole city change every day. I go to work and I learn about a business that I had no idea how it would work. My very first interview that I did with Business Den, I was 20. I had an internship with them 2 years ago, and it was over a wine storage facility. So you think a 20-year-old college student, how much do they know about wine storage? Oh, yes, it's a fine bottle of DRC. Like, I obviously had no idea because I was drinking out of the box at that point. Or sorry, I wasn't drinking at all. Mom, you didn't hear that.
Sure. Grape juice.
Yes. But I get to watch the city grow, and I see how it changes. And more importantly, I get to learn about how everybody does business. And there's so many different businesses out there. You know better than anybody, Viva. You got a lot of different tenants in your buildings, and they do a lot of different things. And it's that kind of game of learning about what everybody does and how their businesses operate and seeing the city grow and transform. That is what makes me happy, and that's why I enjoy this job.
Matt, it's been really fun having you on the show. This is my first interview back from having a baby, and it was really exciting to chat with you. For the listeners who want to get a hold of you, maybe they have a news story,
Sure.
How can they get in touch with you?
Well, I love tips. It's like the best part of the job is waking up and you're like, did you guys hear about this? And it's a text from a source. My email is just Matt, M-A-T-T, @businessden.com. You can read all of our stuff there, businessden.com. And I'm happy to take an email and a call anytime about any idea that you have. If you've bought a building or sold a building or opening a business, I'd love to talk to you and learn more about what you're doing. I'm always open to tips every day.
If you've got a tip in Denver, Matt is your guy. For everybody listening, Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to Commercial Real Estate Secrets. If you have found our podcast to be valuable, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite streaming platforms, and make sure to follow us on social media at Aviva Real Estate. For brokerage services or to get in touch with us, head over to thewarehousehotline.com and submit a contact form. My name is Aviva. This is Commercial Real Estate Secrets. We'll see you next week.